So it takes me a minute. Good morning, Dr. Grobe.
Good morning.
It's so nice to see you virtually.
Yes, sadly, but nicely, yes.
It seems like most of things are still happening virtually with a few in-person consults. So it's great to be able to meet in this way. Much rather be sitting across from one another having coffee, but this works out just great.
I complete agreement there.
We were discussing topics, and the liver, I had no idea. And mind you, I do have a master's degree in science, and I went through anatomy and physiology. I didn't go to naturopathic college like you did. I don't have a degree in biology or genetics like you do. So I had to do a little more research on the liver because I know some basics, and clearly it's been about 25 years since I was in college. So a refresher was necessary, right? Let's not
Yeah.
go there.
Well, we're dating ourselves, that's for
We
sure.
are. But I had no idea that the liver was in charge of what is attributed to 500 different processes in the body. Like I'm thinking, uh, it makes it's the original place, if you will, where bile is made to help break down fats. It's part of digestion. It's reminding me that it really does absorb a lot of nutrients, and it's the major detoxifier. But it goes on and on and on and on and on. So I'm glad we chose this topic because we could talk about the liver for days.
We could talk about easily do a video per function of the liver. But honestly, what most people know, what the public knows, is really just fat metabolism. That's really all they know. Very rarely do they even understand that it affects the digestion, which is today's topic primarily. Um, I I think our understanding of the liver has really improved over the decades. We really did not understand it more than really a detox organ, and that it filters things is kind of how we thought about it. Um, Many of the functions, hormone regulation, blood pressure regulation, circulation back to the heart. If you have varicose veins, that's a liver thing. If you have indigestion, heartburn, it could be a liver thing. It's not always just stomach. And so that's why some people will respond to the digestive aids that block stomach acid and some don't, because it's not always a stomach function. And the thing with the liver, which sits under the right side, under the ribs right there, it contains, in its little folds, it contains the gallbladder. And a lot of people are aware of the gallbladder when it causes them pain and has to be removed, when it's gotten so inflamed or so scarred that they can't use it properly. But think of the gallbladder as more of an on-demand pocket for bile. And bile is used to help you break down primarily fats, although certainly proteins and carbohydrates as well. And so it assists all the digestive processes the stomach and the pancreas have to do. And a lot of people don't understand that the pancreas doesn't just regulate blood sugar, it also helps you break down food. It has two very distinct functions. And we lump them all together a lot of times when we're doing that. So, and then between the liver and the gallbladder, so on the right under your ribs is your liver, and on the left underneath your ribs is your pancreas, and the stomach is in between. So it's like liver, stomach, pancreas. And there's actually a little tiny duct between the liver and the pancreas, a little tiny, itty bitty tiny duct. But if that gets blocked, you can have all kinds of problems. And so it's just amazing just how we're physically designed to have all these systems and then backup systems to help us break things down and digest, because that's essentially what we want to do, is take all our food and make it into a giant smoothie. And then when it gets to our intestines, or basically around the navel area and down, we want to make sure that we can absorb all the nutrients we can from it. So just like when we make our morning smoothie blends, we are trying to break it down as much as possible so that we can get all the goodies out of it, um, that are possible for our nutrition. And so that's why the gallbladder, on demand, because you just sometimes your body just doesn't know when you're going to throw something in there, and you don't want to have to turn on the liver to make bile. If you do, then you have to wait a little bit. You have to wait for that process to kick in and add its fluids to the system.
Well, it makes a little bit of sense as you're describing it to me. So, I always thought, and it's true, it's a separate organ. The gallbladder is a separate organ from the liver, but it really is an adjunct directly related to the liver. It's not so separate as I was thinking. So it's that storage pouch, as you're saying, so
Mhm.
that it's that kind of like an on demand hot water system, right? You don't have to
Exactly.
wait for the hot water to heat up,
Mhm.
for the liver to produce bile. It's already there, and you just hit the spigot,
Mhm.
and bile comes ejected and helps break down the fats in your food.
Mhm.
Correct?
Correct. And I mean, it's very small, so it's not going to hold a whole lot, but it's at least enough to get the process started while you're producing your bile, so that you have ideally this early response and then a continuous response as you're continuing to eat. The problem we run into with the gallbladder is that it can get too much demand, and where it can get inflamed, it can get irritated, we can create stones, it can you can be asking it to try and metabolize fats. Usually people with a rich or a fatty diet in general, that's very generalizing, of course, but will create these stones. And then those can block the itty bitty ducts. And then you've got a big problem. You've got a backup system going on, and then it can enlarge and create problems. Uh, the problem with removing a gallbladder that's dysfunctional, and sometimes you absolutely must, they can really go bad. Um, the problem with removing that is you didn't really remove the problem that caused the gallbladder dysfunction in the first place. You still have to produce bile, which is a liver function. You still need the bile for digestion. It's just now you're going to be less efficient at digesting and breaking down quite a lot of your food, especially fats, um, if you don't have that gallbladder on demand function. So you can do that, but it's just going to be slower or delayed or less volume available by the time it's passed into the intestinal tract. And so that's why a lot of people will still have symptoms. They'll still have indigestion, belching, they still can't tolerate rich foods. They might still even have pain because the liver can still have to respond every time. And if you've got scar tissue, oftentimes that's part of the
Sure.
pain for
And I
liver
do
issues.
understand from personal experience, unfortunately, that getting your gallbladder diagnosed, um, takes lots of steps, and it kind of depends on maybe who you're seeing as a practitioner, how those steps kind of, it's like a rule out almost. Gallstones is like an automatic medical person, surgeon diagnosis is
Mhm,
take it out.
mhm.
They don't even want to manage if you're
Well, because they
having
know it.
pain.
Yeah, eventually it's going to block the duct. So yes, it's if they're small and they seem like they're small enough, they might leave them be. But yeah, as soon as they start getting to certain sizes, then they're like, yeah, you got to remove it, because nothing known to modern medicine will necessarily shrink the
The
stones. Now,
stones.
that does depend on what they're made of too. I have seen them where they are the most beautiful rock hard pebbles ever. I know a practitioner that kept a jar of them. And they were gorgeous, just gorgeous, green, brown, yellow. They were all different colors and they looked polished. They were just beautiful.
Wow.
But sometimes they will be just globular emulsified fat. And so those can disperse and dissolve given the right conditions. And
Sure.
so that's why when people do a gallbladder flush versus a liver flush are quite different things.
Mm.
And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm going to do a liver cleanse. And I look at the recipe and I'm like, no, that's a gallbladder flush. And that's usually the apple cider or the lemon juice, sometimes even using Coca-Cola, something like that. And those can dissolve the really soft ones, and they can help flush that out of the system, and a flush will be appropriate if they're tiny, if it's kind of gravel, what they call gravel or sand. And in fact, and all of this goes through the bowel. This all goes through your stool, okay, on the other end. So this is, it dumps into the intestinal tract. And so when you collect your stool from such a flush and wash it and rinse it, hopefully by then it's just, you know, water coming through you at that point anyway. Um, you can catch that gravel, those stones, that kind of thing. But
Mm.
you personally doing such a thing are not going to be getting those nice big hard pebbles. That comes from surgery. And so when you're trying to get a diagnosis, the first thing the physician's going to do is palpate the abdomen and find tenderness, and they'll often tuck their fingers high up under your ribs, and you're like, oh, I can't, like you take a deep breath and it's just agony pain. Well, that right there is, yes, you absolutely have an inflamed gallbladder right now. Blood tests will show liver enzymes elevated, but liver enzymes elevated could be myriad things. It could be
Mhm.
hepatitis, it could be drug interaction, anything that really just inflames and irritates the liver. So it's not a classic sign of
Right.
that unless you're matching symptoms and everything else together. Um, and you can check other things like amylase and some pancreatic stuff also to see it, to rule in or out some things. You can see signs of infection in a blood count. So there are ways to get some hints and ideas or things that lead you to a particular diagnosis. But a lot of times the patient themselves, they only feel bad after a rich meal or at bed at night when they're sleeping. They'll wake up with pain, but it's like in their shoulder, more often than not in the
Mhm.
shoulder blade behind, on the right side, although it has also happened sometimes on the left. And then so it's hard sometimes to just go by that symptom, but that can be a classic symptom, and that might often send people to the ER in the middle of the night. Is the pain is so intense that they don't know what's happening, or they think they're having a heart attack, and then they'll go to the ER. And so then what happens, whether it's the doctor's office or the ER, is they get an ultrasound. And an ultrasound sometimes can visualize, and
Yeah.
certainly it picks up stones. But sometimes it doesn't see like a necrotic one that's like got basically dying, where the tissue is dying, necrotic. I'm not gonna say gangrenous, but along that lines, where even an
Sure.
infection, they can't see that
Yeah,
necessarily.
it's really kind of a two-dimensional almost,
Right,
and
and
it
that's too
does,
soft tissue. Yeah.
and it is unfortunately a bit, depending how thick you are, how's that for being as politically correct as possible?
That's
Um, if you're thicker, and perhaps have a few more pounds, the ultrasound doesn't, it has to penetrate. It truly is sound waves
hmm
penetrating that creates the vision
hmm
on the screen. And so if it has to go through a lot of tissue in order to see the organ, it may not be as clear.
Well, and remember, the gallbladder is tucked up inside the liver, and so the liver varies from person to person as far as size and color. And obviously there's a very distinct healthy liver color, which is this nice rich reddish brown, kind of mahogany colored, and it's firm, and it's three-lobed usually, but I have seen them extremely large. I've seen them kind of spongy. Uh, so there's so you have that added organ over and around it, and that can make
Mm,
a difference. Although
sure.
that in itself, if you can see that very well, will also tell you, and they can pick up cysts and things like that, even in the liver with an ultrasound. And so even though it's pretty sensitive, it can tell a lot of things. It's still not 100%. I've had people where they've gotten multiple ultrasounds, and it's like everything points to gallbladder, but we don't see anything. And so
Right.
sometimes then the surgeon will go ahead and go, yeah, we just got to go in there. And I would say 98% of the time, yep, sure enough, it was what they would call a smoldering gallbladder, in the sense that at any moment that thing is really going to go bad, bad. And
Yeah.
so they go ahead and remove it at that stage. And so it's like the patient had the symptoms intensely, but it really hadn't gotten to the point where diagnostically they could visualize it quite as bad. But you don't
Well, and
really
I
want
do,
you don't want to
right.
feel
And
that.
I do think too that, you know, unfortunately there's a little bias, and I understand, and I'll call it age bias. Uh, if this pain happens in a younger person, they are really not likely to jump in and demand a surgery. And there's a nuclear medicine study I know that can be done where they inject a dye,
Mhm.
and then they look at how the gallbladder refracts or ejects uh, the bile, and it's done over a period of time. So they watch maybe for 45 minutes or an hour to see how much uh, bile is ejected. And I've seen that study done, I would say more. I've heard about it more in younger people rather than, it's kind of a definitive, is this a surgical intervention or not? And because sometimes the symptoms are so ambiguous
Mhm.
but it is an expensive test. Uh,
Yeah, it would be nice if we could do that on everybody, and then only remove when you have to, because you got a big scar and you still have digestive issues. So you want to ideally optimize the function, because that's what an ejection, you're looking at kind of the function of the gallbladder,
right. Yeah.
which is
Is it
responsive.
doing its job?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when it comes to natural medicine, how do you address things like that? Well, first of all, you kind of ignore the gallbladder and go, okay, well, the gallbladder is a pocket, it's a storage, it's a closet. So you go more to, not to say that you shouldn't or do something. So for example, castor oil over the liver gallbladder, and I say liver gallbladder simultaneously, partly because that's Chinese medicine and they're paired, and partly because the gallbladder is within the liver. But you would put, say, castor oil and a hot pad over the gallbladder liver area, and that can help reduce inflammation because it penetrates, and it's deeply anti-inflammatory. And you can do that for any pain, pretty much pelvic or internal organ, really nicely. But you
And
still go,
not taking the orally having,
no,
you
no, no,
heard
not
about the
all.
horror stories of
Topical.
my parents, having to take castor oil. So no,
No, no, no.
topically.
No, that'll cause immediate elimination of the bowels. And
Awesome. Yeah,
yeah, and
no,
people have done that for good reason and not good reasons, but topical is all I'm talking about. Just apply it on the surface.
got it.
And you can go to sleep like that, just put a nice little hot pad and you've rubbed in your castor oil on your skin and go to sleep. But naturopaths also know, and Chinese medicine practitioners and other doctors, etc., know that the gallbladder isn't the origin of the problem. So you still have to look at, well, how well is the liver functioning, or what is the person doing in their diet? If you're constantly eating fat, and especially if you're eating the wrong kind of fat, saturated fat, hydrolyzed fat, all the fats that are inappropriate chemicals, When you're eating a lot of those, your poor liver is constantly pumping out bile. It's creating bile, and bile is to break it down. Think of Dawn dishwasher soap or dish soap. And you've got a pan that's all greasy. And so when I'm talking about emulsifying, I mean, when you add that soap to the fat, it breaks it in tiny, tiny droplets. So then you can wash it away. You can get it off the surface of that pan and move it on. And that's what bile can do, is it breaks it down into tiny, tiny droplets. When it breaks it down into those tiny, tiny droplets, then we can absorb it and use it for our membranes, our skin, our hair. I mean, it can get pretty microscopic. We need fat in our whole body. We need it for our brain. We need it for our ligaments and tendons. We need it for everything. But whether or not you get a good fat or a bad fat is up to your dietary habits and choices. And then your liver just has to function each and every time, and it has to work hard and hard and hard sometimes when you do a lot of it. That's why rich foods are often associated. Creamy foods, rich foods, fatty foods.
Sure. So I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into the middle of this just because it's
Because you can.
pertinent. It is because I can, and it's pertinent. So let's say, because we've been doing the genetic genomic data, so taking the raw data from genetic testing that's previously been done and looking at the raw data as far as what your genetics say, where you're blocked, and what the workarounds are. So I would imagine, and I could use myself as an example, I have genetic blockages in my Northern European ancestry where we don't take on and digest, like there's these SNPs, right? So fats are not one of the things that my ancestors dealt well with, including good fats.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about genetics, so genetically, and it can be a lineage, it can run in the family. It's not that everybody inherits liver disease or gallbladder disease. What they inherit is the dysfunction in the genes. So there's often multiple sites that affect a particular thing to happen in the body. And so one of the common things you and I have discovered is that a lot of people have problems metabolizing fats, and then a lot of people, in addition to that, specifically have a hard time metabolizing fat soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E. And we can argue that D is actually a hormone, but that's lumped in the category of vitamins. And so
Yes.
when it comes to fat soluble vitamins or fats in general, then we have to look at, okay, what's our workaround? If we can't genetically, if we're not built to really metabolize that well, what are our workarounds? So some of it is dietarily, just don't eat some of those things. But some of them are really necessary. And like I just got finished saying, we need fat for everything. So we really kind of want to optimize our ability to use those fat soluble vitamins and fats in general. So what we do is we go, okay, well, what's the function of getting to those fats from our diet? Bile salts would be an excellent choice, or pancreatic enzymes, or bile salts with pancreatic enzymes. That's kind of the new trendy thing lately, is that not just buying bile salts, but actually doing bile salts that's in a combination with enzymes, which are pancreatic enzymes. And then you get the full emulsification digestive aid, bypassing your own genetic dysfunction. And sometimes it's you've done the damage and it can't recover, and sometimes it's the genetics, and you are never designed to really keep up with that. So the idea is that you would have those bile salts or bile salts with enzymes when you take that fat soluble vitamin, so when you supplement with fish oils or A or D or E, and when you have fats in your diet. And so a lot of people will find that they absorb those nutrients much better. They will find that they feel better, that joint aches, kind of like the rusty tin man kind of thing, or that they can think
Literally
better.
oil him, right?
Yeah, yeah. ADD, a lot of times, DHA or essential fatty acid deficiency, A lot of times you can improve that by giving fats and oils. And but you have to make sure that they can metabolize them. Usually kids can digest them, although I have to admit, like you said, in the young people, at least in America, we are becoming obese because of fast food and poor choices and snacks and
Because
less
the liver
exercise.
has a hard time doing its job, apparently.
Right. So younger and younger people are having what we would have normally considered older adult problems when it came to the digestive function. And I'm going to say hormonal functions, cardiovascular functions that the
Sure.
liver controls. So,
And this whole idea of the liver helping hormones or in that just kind of blew me away until I had, again, my, a lot of life comes from having to trudge through it, and the surgeon says, the medical doctor says, we're going to take out this organ and I can't guarantee that your pain's going to go away. You'll probably feel better and you don't have to do anything differently with your diet. You'll be fine. But go
correct.
see gastroenterology if you have a problem. Kind of like, I'm washing my hands of you. I've done my job. I'm the mechanic. I've taken the part out and now I'm going to pass you off to the next person, but only if you have a problem.
Hmm. Well, the problem is that um, you had a dysfunction that led to, and so you kind of need to explore that further. But that's where functional medicine, naturopathic
Yeah.
medicine,
And
the
I think that
alternatives.
that is really the evolution of in medicine of the last 20 years, I would say, is that consumers, patients, have kind of demanded that there be a reason more than just, we've taken it out, you should be fine. And they're really looking for the root cause.
Yeah, patients want to know why. It's the human condition. Why? We always want to know why. And so when it comes to our body, a lot more people are starting to want to take better self control or self responsibility. And so they want to know the why so they can do something about it, if they can do anything about it. And oftentimes you can. When it comes to the liver, it is the most regenerative organ in our entire body. The mystery to me is why only that one. But and I do know that other systems can regenerate to a point, but they seem to stop, whereas a liver can actually regrow. You can surgically excise. That's why they can do liver transplants. Someone can donate a lobe, a portion of their liver, and it'll grow in the person it was donated to, and it'll grow back in the person it came from. It's just
It's amazing
amazing.
to me. One of the biggest trivia questions I've ever heard is, what's the largest organ in the body? Well, it's the skin. The liver is the second largest organ in the body. Hello. I'm like blown away because it can be like the size of a football. I mean, it's really, when you look at yourself sideways, you could fit a football in there.
It can
It's
be pretty large, yeah.
it can be large. And then so it contributes in such a way uh to hormones because of its connection to the pancreas as well, because that's, we think of the pancreas as controlling blood sugar and insulin. So insulin, part of that hormonal system.
Yes, but I it's mostly related back to fats because the building blocks of your hormones are fat. And so you need to build and break down. So when you're breaking down a hormone, you're basically detoxing it. You're making it go through the detox pathways and breaking it back down. But when you're building it, you have to have the initial molecules for it. So when a person has hormonal imbalances, male or female, in Chinese medicine, for example, we might have a stagnation of the liver. So hormones either can't be broken down, so they're like a plane that can't land and discharge its passengers. So it can irritate after a while, okay, or build up excessive hormones as you add more planes in the sky, so to speak, and uh, and so you want it to be more efficient. You want it to have a good flow of things going in and things going out. And so the liver really regulates whether or not your hormones stay in your system or come out of your system. And because it's a detox organ, it can eliminate or not, depending on how well its function is, the things that would aggravate or be hormone like. So, a common way to look at that one is in estrogen dominance or all the things in our diets chemically and antibiotics that have estrogen like effects in the body. So, if the liver is not detoxing those efficiently, they will have an additive effect to your normal hormone function that are produced by the glands and other places of the body. And so, if you can't detoxify those, then you have basically an estrogen dominance effect in the body, which can lead to cancers, which can lead to PMS, which can lead to problems with menopause, all kinds of things. Um, the liver is also the most blood rich organ. It's a solid organ as opposed to the heart, which is hollow. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
And the and so it if you, well, not many people hold a liver in their hands, but if you held a liver in your
yeah,
hands, and some people still eat liver, animal livers, it's actually a fantastic way, if you eat meat, of building blood in your own system because it is blood rich. But it affects your, again, building and breakdown of the key components in the blood and circulation. So if blood is not circulating back to the heart to be oxygenated and become nice and bright and red and healthy, things will start getting dark or congested, and you can physically see that in a liver as well. You'll see it's
sure.
either nice and red brown, or you'll see that it's really dark and kind of black looking, and
Hmm.
it's again that stagnation or flow.
And when we talk, you're talking about hormones, you're talking about all the hormones. So, thyroid hormone, insulin, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, all that whole endocrine system.
So for example, insulin. So insulin is designed to be secreted by the pancreas in order to bring blood sugar down. Like you eat a candy bar, blood sugar spikes up, and the body's like, oh, no, 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 that's going to do some damage. Bring it down. So it takes insulin, it brings it down. So it wants energy, but that's a little too much all at once. So it brings it down so that you can use it as energy and not in a toxic way that's pro-inflammatory and neurological damage and other things. The problem with too much sugar, refined sugar, is that demand response of the insulin fades after time, and then you become less sensitive to the insulin. That's insulin resistance, or you can't produce enough anymore. And so then those are the diabetics. When you have excess sugar, the insulin just doesn't bring it down, but you also take that and store it in the liver as fat because you're like, well, in case I need it later for energy. Okay. Now that's fine if you're eating complex carbohydrates like whole grains, or you're getting honey or molasses as your sugar, where it takes time to break it down, because then you titrate a little bit of sugar at a time out. It's not so good if everything's refined sugar in your sodas and your even your condiments, in your ketchup and in
Yeah.
salad dressings. I mean, sugar, sugar, sugar in everything. And so the problem is we get more than we can take in. And so what used to be a fatty liver used to be because you drank so much alcohol, which turns to sugar in the body. And when you have a lot of it and you're alcoholic or have more than your capacity, then what happens is your body stores all that excess sugar that it can no longer insulin control as fat around the liver. And it's like a buffer zone, but it's like putting things in the closet, so to speak,
Sure.
okay, to store for later, but you never use it. You never use it. You're not running from berries anymore. But now we have a new condition called a non-alcoholic fatty liver, and that's because of refined sugar. Or, and again, it might not be just your habit. It could also be your capacity, either genetically or otherwise, to control that sugar and not have to store it via the liver. But that is the new trendy thing that people are getting, is a fatty liver, and they don't drink at all.
Well, and I have actually seen that with a couple of people that I have taken care of,
Mhm.
and they were young. Not only did they have fatty liver, uh, they had an undiagnosed gallbladder,
Mhm.
and they were in their late teens. And so the one case I'm thinking of, that it was a major surgery. Number one, the gallbladder had to come out and it had to
Mhm.
be kind of dissected, if you will, because it hadn't been working probably since this child was born, potentially. And then the liver was very much fatty, but almost clogged. And
Yeah.
so it was a major surgery that was done, and doing better now. But that was the first time I'd ever heard of ox bile or bile salts. And I didn't realize that, honestly, most people potentially should or could be taking them if they've had their gallbladder taken out. And
If
what
they've
I,
had their gallbladder removed, I would recommend it for sure.
yeah,
Although some people just diet regulation, they have managed just fine. Um, Someone especially that young probably has a defect in their production and could have been genetically inherited for sure,
sure.
or because even mom's diet during, and I'm not going to blame it on mom. I'm just saying that it's possible the things that mom craved or ate during that time as the fetus is developing kind of sets the tone of what that person's going to be able to do or not do, or how their function is. So sometimes that can regulate how they develop as well genetically. um, so, at the hindsight, there's not much you can do. The problem with the fatty liver is you can't just scrape it off. The liver is
Yeah.
porous like a sponge. So if it's a fatty liver, it's fatty through the whole liver. It's not just on the outside. And so you can't really like wring it or scrape it off. It's just it is what
Yeah.
it is at that point.
It's not like taking the skin off the chicken where it peels off easily and the
Right.
fat comes with it. It's throughout the entire organ.
Right.
Yeah.
But remember, it's very regenerative. So you can, even if you had to remove part of that horribly damaged liver, you still might have great normal function if you can get the right things going properly. And so a way to help that would be bile salt specifically, but there's many other things you can do. So it depends on the how you treat the liver depends on the function you're trying to aid that the liver has.
Sure.
So for example, one of the herbs that I use a lot on people is milk thistle, because it's a gentle way of assisting the liver to detox. It's not a full on bold detox. You can create that dose related. You can take higher and higher doses and force a detox. But typically, it's more supportive. It's more what we would call in Chinese medicine a tonifier, where it can help uh, the it helps the liver do what it's supposed to do without making it happen regardless of the liver.
Sure.
There are other herbs that will put you into full on detox, and you can buy detox tea, and that will do that. But oftentimes, a detox program of any kind will depend on how compromised you are in your detox pathways, and that includes kidneys and bowels and other places. So, a lot of those detox blends will include things for other organs, not just liver. And dandelion is a really good one for that. It's got a lot of properties for the liver and it has a lot of properties for the kidney. So, it assists the two of the big organs, internal organs, that will help with your detox. Of course, skin is a detoxifier, the bowels,
Sure.
sweat. That's so there's other ways, but those are ones that will help the liver.
Well, what I uh, surmise from this is uh, really the liver is the first thing generally that should be addressed. And people should make an appointment and Zoom with you, or consult with us regarding their genetics, because it's very possible that there's some workarounds that will really help to improve their health and overall immune system. Uh, and and then the positive, which may feel like a negative, could be that as things improve, there are some symptoms that come up because other organs are finally able to do their jobs as well.
Yeah, yeah. As you get more efficient, sometimes other things will pop up for sure. I would say if you have any digestive issues, hormonal issues, blood pressure issues, um, at the minimum, circulatory issues, the liver has to be ruled in or out as far as whether or not it's primary source of the problem. It can be part of the system that's involved, but it may or may not be the primary. Assisting the liver in whatever way, though, can help a lot of times with symptoms, even if there's a genetic problem. The one thing that in the work we've done that I have found the most remarkable is even though symptomatically I can say, oh, yes, this is that we've got a gallbladder, liver problem, whichever one or both. But to see it genetically has really been kind of an eye opener because it matches the symptoms and to see the compromise in the fat soluble vitamins sometimes separately from any of the problems with the liver. So I've seen people with fat metabolism problems, but do okay genetically with their fat soluble vitamins. And then I've seen people with both, and it's like, God, no wonder you have this, and this. So that was really helpful to me to see that correlation.
I think I was born asking the question why. And so the genetic testing for me and for my family, for my kids who are now adults, um, answered a lot of those why questions,
Hmm.
and it became more about fine tuning and finding what worked for them and what they were willing to do. And because they're adults and they don't have to take my advice anymore, they get to live their own lives. But I'm a lifelong learner, and I continue to be astounded at all of the functional medicine type of things that now answer those questions. You just have to find the right physician or practitioner, and it makes a big difference.
Yes, there's a lot you can do with lab tests and symptoms and physical exam um, to take you to that point. But when you add in the genetics, it just brings it up a nice little shiny notch. But the remedies are still about the same as far as how you address it, the treatments. At least from the natural perspective, there's always some new drug, from allopathic. But they're always mimicking nature anyway. And they tend to target single functions and not the system. And that's where I think natural medicines, whether it's acupuncture, Ayurvedic, whatever,
Hmm.
even biofeedback, that type of thing, you're looking more at how the system functions within the system. And so it's not a one medicine approach ever to a problem with that, even though the liver uh, can distinctly have a problem in one system sometimes, that or one function that it does. It's so complex. The liver is so complex that I would say it's really important to have a variety of options available when you're trying to address problems there. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's truly, the human body wants to find its homeostasis. It's always looking to correct itself. It's always looking to stay in balance. And so some of these things are really helpful uh, in creating that balance, because your body will figure it out in a roundabout sort of way, much like the little tiny pathway between the liver and uh, and the pancreas. That to me is just, a, a, it was designed.
Yeah, I often liken the body to a little Labrador puppy. It will do anything in the world for you. anything. But whether it thrives or not kind of depends on you, kind of depends on how you uh, manage that. And it will always find another way to keep you going, another way to keep you going, another way to keep you going to the best of its ability with what it's given. It'll keep doing that. It'll keep coming back for you. So that was bizarre. Your whole head just disappeared. All right. Well, so anyway, so yeah, we're wrapping up and we're just kind of,
This is great.
I have to say liver is one of my favorite organs. Yeah.
Well, I could see why. It takes you down 500 different pathways.
Yes.
And I would not have really thought about it as far as circulation goes, but it makes a lot of sense because so much blood does pass through the liver that it would be so important.
Yes,
So if people want to have a consult with you, going to your website, drmystique.com, and hitting the little contact tab would get an email off to you.
They can do that. They can contact me by my office phone, 360-527-2812, call or text.
There you go.
Trying to get a little more modernized.
Our age is showing.
Yeah.
I have my contact information through Matteson, Matteson, communications with an s.com. And certainly you can hit the contact tab and it'll send off an email to me. And I'm in the process of doing some updating on the website. So, but really, either one of us would be happy to book a consult, either separately or together, and help you help your own body function with great success.
Yes, we want it to function optimally for sure.
Wonderful.
All right,
Anything
thank
else to
you.
add? You're so welcome, Dr. Grobe. Thank you.
All right, thank you for all your great questions.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.